Introduction to Emma and the Bank Incident. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Willow Creek's only bank. It was a modest establishment, nestled in the heart of the town. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree standing proudly in front of the building. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with the usual hum of transactions, the clicking of keyboards, and muffled conversations. Emma Clark, a kind-hearted woman in her early 30s, stood patiently at the end of the queue. She clutched a small, worn-out purse in her hands, her savings book peeking out from its zipper. Emma had Down syndrome, and though her life wasn't easy, her radiant smile and positive outlook endeared her to those who took the time to know her. However, the world wasn't always kind. Emma was here to deposit her savings, money she'd earned from helping out at a local cafe and crafting handmade greeting cards she sold at the town's weekend market. She was proud of her work, and today was a special day. She'd saved enough to buy art supplies for her growing hobby of painting, something that brought her immense joy. As the queue moved forward, Emma hummed a soft tune to herself, oblivious to the judgmental glances from some of the other customers. Her happiness was contagious, but not everyone appreciated her bright demeanor. She was used to the stares and whispers, they were part of her everyday life. When it was finally Emma's turn, she approached the counter, her smile wide and hopeful. The teller, a stern-looking woman named Janet, barely looked up as she muttered, "Next." "Good morning," Emma chirped, placing her savings book and purse on the counter. "I'd like to deposit my savings, please." Janet sighed, clearly annoyed by Emma's enthusiasm. "Fill out this slip," she said curtly, shoving a deposit form toward her without a second glance. Emma picked up the pen, her brow furrowing in concentration. Writing wasn't her strongest skill, but she always tried her best. She began filling out the form slowly, her handwriting shaky but legible. As the seconds ticked by, Janet tapped her pen against the counter, her patience wearing thin. "We don't have all day," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Emma to hear. A couple of customers behind Emma snickered. Emma looked up, her smile faltering. "I'm almost done," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Janet rolled her eyes. "You should have filled this out before getting in line," she snapped, grabbing the form from Emma's hands. "Let me do it. You're holding everyone up." The room grew uncomfortably silent as the exchange unfolded. Emma's cheeks flushed red, and she looked down, clutching her purse tightly. She didn't mean to cause trouble. She just wanted to deposit her savings. One of the customers whispered to another, "Why don't they have a separate line for people like her? It's slowing everything down." The words stung Emma like a sharp blade. She had heard similar remarks before, but it didn't make them any easier to bear. She blinked back tears, determined not to cry. Just then, the door to the bank opened, and a tall man in a black baseball cap and sunglasses walked in. He moved with a quiet confidence, his presence commanding attention without trying. It was Keanu Reeves. Keanu was in town for a low-profile film project and had decided to handle some personal errands himself. He preferred to keep things simple, blending in with the crowd whenever he could. But as he stepped into the bank, he immediately noticed the tense atmosphere. His sharp eyes quickly found the source, Emma, standing at the counter, visibly upset. Keanu's heart sank. He had always been sensitive to situations where people were treated unfairly. He didn't know Emma, but her vulnerability was palpable, and he couldn't stand by and do nothing. As Janet finished filling out the form, she shoved it back at Emma. "Sign here," she said coldly. Emma's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Before she could sign, Keanu stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. The room turned to look at him. Even in his casual attire, there was something undeniably charismatic about him. Janet glanced up, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone less sharp but still guarded. Keanu removed his sunglasses, revealing his familiar face. A murmur spread through the room as people recognized him. "Yes," he said, his gaze steady. "I couldn't help but notice how you were speaking to this young lady. It's not acceptable." Janet's cheeks flushed, and she stammered, "I was just trying to speed things up." The line. Keanu held up a hand, silencing her. "She has every right to take her time, just like anyone else. There's no need to rush her or make her feel unwelcome." Emma looked up at Keanu, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. She had seen his movies before but never imagined meeting him in real life, let alone having him stand up for her. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked Emma gently, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Keanu smiled warmly. "No need to thank me. You're doing great." The room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Janet shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Keanu turned back to her. "I think an apology is in order," he said, his tone polite but firm. Janet hesitated before mumbling, "I'm sorry." Emma nodded, her confidence returning slightly. "It's okay," she said softly. Keanu stood tall again, addressing the room. "We all have busy lives, but kindness doesn't take much time. Let's try to be better to one another." The words hung in the air, resonating with everyone present. Some of the customers looked down, ashamed of their earlier behavior. Others nodded in agreement, moved by his words. Keanu stayed by Emma's side as she completed her transaction, offering her quiet encouragement. When she was done, she turned to him and said, "You're very kind." "Thank you." He smiled. "The world needs more kindness, don't you think?" As they walked out of the bank together, Emma felt a warmth in her chest. She had entered the bank feeling small and defeated, but she left with her head held high, knowing she wasn't alone. Keanu intervenes. The bell above the bank's entrance jingled faintly as Keanu Reeves and Emma stepped outside, but the echoes of what had just transpired lingered in the air. Keanu could still feel the tension from inside the bank, the judgmental stares, the subtle murmurs, moments he had seen too often, moments that had no place in the world. Emma glanced up at him shyly, her small hands clutching her purse tightly. She looked as though she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Keanu noticed and crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "You okay?" he asked gently, his voice calm and soothing. Emma hesitated, then nodded. I think so. Thank you for helping me." Keanu smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me. No one deserves to be treated like that. You handled it with more grace than most people would." Emma's cheeks flushed pink at the compliment, and she looked down, a small smile playing on her lips. "Sometimes people don't understand me," she said softly. "They think I'm different." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Different isn't bad. Different is beautiful. It means you see the world in your own way. And that's something special." Emma looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of gratitude and hope. She wasn't used to hearing such words from strangers, let alone someone as famous as Keanu Reeves. As they spoke, a small crowd began to form outside the bank. News of Keanu's intervention had spread like wildfire, and people were curious. Some passers-by recognized him and paused, pulling out their phones to snap photos or record videos. Others simply stopped to watch, intrigued by the unusual scene. Keanu noticed the attention but didn't let it distract him. His focus remained on Emma. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Emma nodded. "I live just down the street. It's not far." "Good," Keanu said, standing upright. "How about I walk you home? You've had a rough day." "It's the least I can do." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You don't have to." "I want to," Keanu said with a reassuring smile. And besides, I think we could both use some fresh air. Emma nodded eagerly, her earlier discomfort fading as they began walking together. The crowd watched in awe as the Hollywood star strolled through the small town with Emma by his side. Whispers of admiration and curiosity filled the air. A quiet walk through Willow Creek. The streets of Willow Creek were peaceful, lined with charming cottages and small shops. The occasional car drove by, but for the most part, it felt like a step back in time, a place untouched by the rush of the modern world. As they walked, Keanu asked Emma about her life. At first, she was hesitant, unsure of how much to share. But his genuine interest and kind demeanor quickly put her at ease. I work at a cafe, Emma said, her voice gaining confidence. I clean tables and help serve drinks. The people there are nice to me. And on weekends, I sell my cards at the market. Cards? Keanu asked, intrigued. What kind of cards? Handmade ones, Emma explained. Birthday cards, thank you cards, all kinds. I like to draw and paint. It makes me happy. Keanu's eyes lit up. That's amazing, Emma. I'd love to see your work someday. Emma beamed, her earlier sadness completely forgotten. She had never expected someone like Keanu Reeves to take an interest in her art. Maybe I can show you sometime, she said shyly. I'd like that, Keanu replied. Creativity is such a gift. The world needs more of it. They continued walking, the conversation flowing naturally. Emma opened up about her dreams, her struggles, and her love for art. She spoke about how painting helped her express herself in ways words couldn't. Keanu listened intently, offering words of encouragement and admiration. The crowd and the questions. Unbeknownst to Emma, their walk had attracted a following. People were snapping photos from a distance, and a few had started recording videos, capturing the heartwarming interaction between the movie star and the kind-hearted woman. By the time they reached the corner of Main Street, a local reporter had caught wind of the situation. Armed with a notepad and a camera, she approached them cautiously. Excuse me, Mr. Reeves, she said tentatively. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Keanu glanced at Emma, silently asking for her permission. She nodded, though she looked a little nervous. Keanu turned back to the reporter. Sure, but let's keep it brief. The reporter smiled, clearly excited. Thank you. Can you tell us what happened at the bank? People are saying you stood up for this young lady. Keanu nodded. That's right. I saw something that wasn't right, and I couldn't stay silent. Emma here is an incredible person, and she deserves to be treated with respect, just like anyone else. The reporter jotted down notes furiously. That's amazing. Do you think this kind of kindness is something people can learn from? I hope so, Keanu said. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can make all the difference in the world. If we all took a moment to think about how our actions affect others, the world would be a much better place. Emma smiled at his words, feeling a swell of pride. She had always believed in kindness, but hearing someone as influential as Keanu Reeves say it made her feel validated. The reporter turned to Emma. And how do you feel about what happened today? Emma hesitated for a moment, then said, I was sad at first, but now I feel happy. Mr. Reeves helped me when I needed it. He reminded me that there are good people in the world. Her words were simple but heartfelt, and they left an impression on everyone who heard them. Reaching Emma's home. After the brief interview, Keanu and Emma continued their walk. They arrived at a small, cozy house with a white picket fence and a garden full of flowers. Emma opened the gate and turned to Keanu. This is my home, she said. Thank you for walking with me. It was my pleasure, Keanu said with a smile. You're an incredible person, Emma. Don't ever forget that. Emma nodded, her eyes glistening with tears of gratitude. You're incredible too. Thank you for everything. Keanu gave her a small wave as she walked up to her front door and disappeared inside. He stood there for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of her little home. Then he turned and began walking back toward town, his mind racing with thoughts. He didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness would have a ripple effect far beyond Willow Creek. The ripple effect at the bank. Back at Willow Creek Bank, the tension from the earlier confrontation had not entirely dissipated. Janet, the teller who had humiliated Emma, sat at her station, replaying the incident in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized the paperwork on her desk. She had never been publicly called out like that before, let alone by someone as famous as Keanu Reeves. Her co-workers avoided her gaze, and even the manager had retreated to his office, unsure of how to address the situation. In the waiting area, customers whispered to each other, their voices tinged with a mix of awe and guilt. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, and for the first time in a long while, the usual hustle and bustle of the bank felt muted. One of the customers, a middle-aged man named Greg, finally broke the silence. "You know," he said, turning to the others in line, "what that guy said, he's right. We were all just standing here, watching. None of us stepped in to help her." A young woman nodded in agreement, clutching her purse tightly. "I was thinking the same thing. She didn't deserve that. And we all just let it happen." The conversation began to spread like wildfire. People who had initially been mere bystanders now started reflecting on their actions, or lack thereof. The incident with Emma had stirred something deep within them. They realized that they had witnessed cruelty and done nothing to stop it. Janet's internal struggle. Meanwhile, Janet sat in silence, her face flushed with embarrassment. She had worked at the bank for over 10 years, and she prided herself on her efficiency. But efficiency had come at a cost. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten the importance of kindness, especially toward people like Emma. Her thoughts were interrupted when her coworker, Linda, approached her desk. Linda was known for her gentle demeanor and had often clashed with Janet over her brusque attitude. "Janet," Linda began hesitantly, "are you okay?" Janet looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and regret. "No, Linda, I'm not. I don't know what came over me. I didn't mean to humiliate her, but I did. And now everyone's talking about it." Linda placed a reassuring hand on Janet's shoulder. "Maybe it's a good thing that people are talking. It's a chance to reflect and grow. You can still make it right, you know." Janet sighed. "How? I can't undo what I said." "Start with an apology," Linda suggested. "Not just to Emma, but to yourself. You've got to forgive yourself for making a mistake before you can truly make amends." Janet nodded slowly, the weight of Linda's words sinking in. "You're right," she admitted. "I'll find a way to make it right." The bank manager steps in. In his office, the bank manager, Mr. Harris, sat at his desk, scrolling through his phone. The story of Keanu Reeves standing up for Emma had already hit social media, thanks to the videos captured by bystanders. Comments poured in, praising Keanu's actions and calling for change at the bank. Mr. Harris rubbed his temples. The last thing he wanted was a PR disaster, but he also knew that this was an opportunity to make meaningful changes. He called a quick meeting with his staff, gathering everyone in the break room. "Listen," he began, his tone serious, "what happened today wasn't just embarrassing, it was a wake-up call. We're supposed to serve this community, not alienate people. From now on, we're implementing mandatory inclusivity and sensitivity training for all employees." The staff exchanged surprised glances, but no one protested. Even Janet nodded in agreement, her expression solemn. "And one more thing," Mr. Harris added. "We're going to host a community day here at the bank, a chance to rebuild trust with our customers and show that we're committed to being better. I want everyone to contribute ideas." Linda raised her hand. "What if we invite Emma to share her story?" It could be a powerful way to highlight the importance of empathy. Mr. Harris hesitated. Do you think she'd be willing after what happened? She might, Linda said. But only if we approach her with genuine sincerity. The room fell silent as the weight of the suggestion settled over them. Finally, Mr. Harris nodded. Let's give it a shot. Emma's initial hesitation. Later that day, Emma sat at her small wooden table, painting a colorful landscape of rolling hills and a bright blue sky. Her mind kept drifting back to the bank and Keanu Reeves. She still couldn't believe he had stood up for her. The thought brought a warm smile to her face, but it also reminded her of the hurtful words she had heard. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She opened it to find Linda standing there, holding a bouquet of daisies and a hesitant smile. Hi, Emma, Linda said softly. I'm Linda. I work at the bank. Do you mind if I come in? Emma hesitated but stepped aside, allowing Linda to enter. They sat together at the table, the daisies resting between them. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Linda began. For what happened today? It wasn't right, and it's not who we want to be as a community. Emma nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. We want to make things better, Linda continued. The bank is planning a community day, and we were hoping you'd be willing to share your story. It's okay if you're not ready, but we think it could make a big difference. Emma's eyes widened. Me? Talk in front of people? Linda smiled. You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. You're stronger than you realize, Emma. The town rallies. Word of the upcoming community day spread quickly, and the town began buzzing with excitement. Local businesses offered to sponsor the event, and residents volunteered to help organize it. Even people who hadn't witnessed the incident at the bank felt inspired to participate. Keanu Reeves, who had been staying at a nearby inn, heard about the event and immediately reached out to the organizers. I'd like to be there, he said. And I'd like to help Emma prepare, if she's willing. When Emma heard about Keanu's offer, her heart soared. With his support, she began to believe that she could face her fears and share her story. A ripple effect of kindness. The incident at the bank had sparked something far greater than anyone had anticipated. People in Willow Creek began re-evaluating how they treated one another. Acts of kindness became more common, and conversations about inclusivity and empathy took center stage. For Emma, the days leading up to the community day were filled with a mix of nerves and excitement. With Keanu's guidance, she practiced her speech, finding strength in his unwavering support. She began to see herself not as a victim, but as a voice for change. Emma's journey of healing. The days leading up to the community day were a whirlwind of preparation and self-discovery for Emma. Each morning, she woke up feeling the weight of what was ahead. She knew she had agreed to stand in front of a crowd and share her story, but as the reality of the event sank in, her insecurities began to creep back. Speaking wasn't her strong suit, and the idea of standing before so many people, especially after the humiliating incident at the bank, felt overwhelming. Despite her doubts, Emma found herself drawing strength from the most unexpected source, Keanu Reeves. Since their encounter at the bank, he had stayed true to his word, showing up at her little white picket house every morning to help her prepare. He wasn't there as a Hollywood star but as a friend, someone who believed in her more than she believed in herself. Each time he arrived, he carried a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate reassurance. The first time they practiced, Emma could barely get through a sentence. She sat at her dining table, her hands trembling as she clutched the piece of paper she had written her speech on. Her voice quivered with every word, her eyes darting nervously to Keanu, who sat across from her with a calm, encouraging smile. When she faltered, he leaned forward, his deep voice steady and kind. "Take your time, Emma," he said softly. "This is your story. No one else can tell it like you can." Emma took a shaky breath and nodded, starting again. This time, she managed a few sentences before her voice cracked and tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered, dropping the paper onto the table. Keanu reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "I've seen it. What happened at the bank? You didn't let it break you. You held your head high and walked out of there with grace. That takes courage, Emma. This speech. It's just another way to show that courage." Emma wiped her eyes, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, as though she was capable of more than she believed. It wasn't just the words, there was something about the way Keanu looked at her, as though he truly saw her. Not as someone with Down syndrome, but as a person with strength and value. Over the next few days, their practice sessions became a routine. Each morning, Keanu would arrive with 2 cups of coffee, black for him and sweetened with cream for Emma, and they would sit at the dining table, going over her speech. He encouraged her to rewrite parts of it in her own words, to make it feel more natural. He taught her to pause when she felt overwhelmed, to take a deep breath and keep going. At first, it was hard. Emma struggled to find her voice, to speak without fear of being judged. But as the days passed, something began to change. With each session, her confidence grew. She started to smile more, to laugh at her mistakes instead of letting them discourage her. Keanu's encouragement became the foundation of her progress, his unwavering support a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. One afternoon, as they took a break from practicing, Emma showed Keanu her art for the first time. She led him into her small, sunlit living room, where her paintings covered the walls. Landscapes, flowers, and abstract designs filled the space, each piece vibrant and full of life. Keanu's eyes lit up as he took it all in. "Emma," he said, turning to her with genuine admiration. "These are incredible. You have a gift." Emma blushed, her hands fidgeting nervously. "They're just something I do for fun," she said. "It helps me feel better when I'm sad." Keanu smiled. "It's more than that. Your art has a voice, just like your story. It's a way of showing the world who you are." His words stayed with Emma long after he left that day. She began to see her art in a new light, not just as a hobby but as an extension of herself. The idea of sharing her story at the community day no longer felt like an impossible challenge, it felt like an opportunity to show the world who she really was. The morning of the event arrived faster than Emma expected. She woke up early, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite blue dress and a simple necklace that her mother had given her years ago. As she stood in front of the mirror, she practiced her speech one last time, her voice steady and clear. When Keanu arrived to pick her up, he was greeted by the sight of a transformed Emma. Her smile was radiant, her posture confident, and for the first time since the incident at the bank, she looked at peace. Keanu couldn't help but smile as he saw her. "You look amazing," he said sincerely. "Are you ready?" Emma took a deep breath and nodded. "I think I am." The community day was held at the town square, where a stage had been set up surrounded by colorful decorations. A crowd had already gathered, the energy buzzing with anticipation. Local vendors had set up booths, children ran around with balloons, and a small band played cheerful music in the background. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the event. As Emma and Keanu arrived, the crowd parted to let them through. Whispers of admiration filled the air as people recognized Keanu, but their attention quickly shifted to Emma. The story of what had happened at the bank had spread, and many were eager to hear her speak. Emma felt a wave of nerves as she stepped onto the stage, the microphone in front of her suddenly seeming much taller than it had during practice. She glanced at Keanu, who stood at the edge of the stage, his presence a steady anchor. He gave her a small nod, his expression encouraging. Taking another deep breath, Emma began to speak. Her voice was soft at first, but as she continued, it grew stronger. She spoke about her love for art, her dreams, and the challenges she faced as someone with Down syndrome. She shared how the incident at the bank had hurt her but also how it had taught her the importance of standing up for herself and others. As she spoke, the crowd fell silent, hanging on to her every word. Her vulnerability and honesty touched their hearts, and by the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The applause that followed was thunderous, a wave of support and admiration that washed over Emma and filled her with a sense of pride she had never known. Keanu was the first to step onto the stage, wrapping her in a warm hug as the crowd continued to cheer. "You were incredible," he whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Emma smiled through her tears, her heart soaring. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not just for her struggles, but for her strength. And it was a feeling she would carry with her forever. The Community Day event. The town square of Willow Creek had never seen an event quite like this. Bright banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, strung from lamp posts and booths that lined the perimeter of the square. Vendors sold fresh lemonade, baked goods, and handmade crafts, while children ran about with painted faces and balloon animals clutched tightly in their hands. The cheerful chaos created a buzz of excitement, but all eyes were on the stage in the center of the square, where Emma had just delivered her heartfelt speech. The applause had finally begun to die down, but the emotional resonance of Emma's words lingered in the air. People in the audience exchanged glances, some wiping away tears, others clapping softly even as the moment passed. Emma stood on the stage, her cheeks flushed with pride and relief. For someone who had spent so much of her life feeling unseen, the sight of the crowd smiling up at her felt like a dream. Keanu Reeves stepped forward to the microphone, his presence commanding yet humble. He had insisted that this day wasn't about him, but about Emma and the message she carried. Still, the crowd erupted into cheers at the sight of him. He raised a hand to quiet them, his signature warm smile calming the excitement. "Thank you," he began, his deep voice carrying over the square. "Thank you for showing up today, not just for Emma, but for what this day represents. It's not every day we get to witness something as powerful as someone finding their voice." He turned to Emma, who stood to his side, her hands clutching the edges of her blue dress. "Emma, you are the bravest person I've met in a long time. You didn't just speak for yourself today, you spoke for so many people who felt like they didn't belong. You reminded all of us that kindness, understanding, and courage can change the world." The crowd erupted into cheers once more, but Keanu wasn't finished. He waited patiently until the applause quieted down. "And it's not just Emma who has the power to make a difference. It's all of us. Every single one of us can choose kindness. We can choose to see each other, to support each other, and to be better." He stepped back, motioning for Emma to join him at the microphone. She hesitated for a moment, her nerves returning in the face of the crowd, but Keanu gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped forward. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't think I could do this, but I did. And it's because of all of you. Because someone believed in me. And now, I want to believe in myself." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that resonated deeply with everyone listening. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still, the bustling energy of the town square pausing in honor of her courage. As Emma stepped back, the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Strangers reached out to shake her hand, offer her flowers, and thank her for sharing her story. Some even shared their own experiences, inspired by her bravery. Emma found herself at the center of a ripple effect she never could have imagined, her vulnerability unlocking something profound in others. Meanwhile, the event continued to unfold. The bank staff, who had played a pivotal role in organizing the Community Day, had set up a booth offering free financial literacy workshops and inclusivity training materials. Janet, the teller who had humiliated Emma, stood behind the counter, her demeanor noticeably softer than before. She handed out brochures and greeted each person with a smile, making a conscious effort to connect with the community in a way she hadn't before. When Emma approached the booth, Janet froze for a moment, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. But then, she stepped around the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she held out a small bouquet of daisies. "Emma," Janet said, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong. I let my impatience and my ignorance get the better of me, and you didn't deserve that. You deserve kindness and respect, just like anyone else." Emma looked at the flowers, then back at Janet. For a moment, she said nothing, the tension thick in the air. Then, she smiled and took the daisies, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you. It's okay. I'm glad we're both learning." Janet blinked back tears, nodding. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a start. For both of them. Elsewhere in the square, Keanu moved through the crowd, shaking hands, signing autographs, and posing for photos. He made a point to engage with everyone, from the youngest children to the oldest attendees. But even as he moved among the people, his attention remained on Emma, watching as she interacted with her community, her confidence growing with each passing moment. The event wasn't just a celebration of Emma's courage, it was a celebration of the power of community. Local musicians took the stage to perform, filling the air with lively tunes that brought smiles to everyone's faces. A group of children performed a short play about kindness, their laughter infectious. Vendors donated a portion of their proceeds to local disability advocacy groups, inspired by Emma's story. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, the crowd gathered once more around the stage for the closing remarks. Emma stood alongside Keanu, the mayor, and Mr. Harris, the bank manager. Together, they thanked the community for their support and announced plans for future events focused on inclusivity and kindness. When the event finally came to an end, Emma found herself standing at the edge of the square, watching as the crowd dispersed. She clutched the daisies from Janet in one hand and a stack of thank you notes from attendees in the other. Keanu joined her, his hands tucked into his pockets as he looked out over the scene. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. Emma smiled up at him. "We did it." Keanu chuckled. "Fair enough. But today was about you, Emma. And you were amazing." Emma looked down at the daisies, her smile growing. "I feel different," she said. "Like I can do more. Like I can be more." "You can," Keanu said. "This is just the beginning." As they stood there, the lights of the town square twinkling behind them, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She wasn't just a woman with Down syndrome. She was an artist, a speaker, a person with a voice that mattered. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. The bank's transformation. The days following the community day were unlike anything Willow Creek had ever experienced. What began as a small, heartfelt event had sparked a ripple effect that touched every corner of the town. People who had attended the event couldn't stop talking about it, Emma's bravery, Keanu's support, and the collective sense of purpose that had brought everyone together. The spirit of kindness lingered in the air, and it wasn't long before tangible changes began to take root. At Willow Creek Bank, the transformation was already underway. Mr. Harris, the bank manager, had wasted no time implementing the inclusivity training program he had announced during the community day. Every employee, from the tellers to the managers, was required to attend weekly workshops designed to foster empathy and understanding. These sessions weren't just about checking a box, they were immersive experiences that encouraged staff to see the world through the eyes of others. Janet, the teller who had been at the center of the incident with Emma, was perhaps the most deeply affected. She approached the training sessions with a humility that surprised even herself. Each workshop forced her to confront her own biases, to question the habits she had developed over years of working in a fast-paced environment. It was uncomfortable at first, but as the weeks went by, she began to see the world differently. One session, in particular, stood out to her. The trainer, a man who used a wheelchair, shared a story about being dismissed and underestimated his entire life. His words resonated with Janet in a way she hadn't expected. She thought back to the day at the bank, to the look in Emma's eyes as she struggled to fill out the deposit slip. It wasn't just embarrassment she had seen, it was the pain of being dismissed, the weight of years of feeling invisible. After that session, Janet approached Mr. Harris with an idea. "I think we need to do more," she said. "Training is a good start, but what if we made this bank a place where everyone feels welcome? We could create a dedicated accessibility program, make sure our services are easy to use for everyone, no matter their abilities." Mr. Harris looked at her with surprise, then nodded thoughtfully. "I like that idea, Janet. Let's make it happen." Within weeks, the bank had rolled out a series of changes. They installed larger, easy-to-read signage and added an accessibility desk with staff trained to assist customers who needed extra support. They partnered with local organizations to offer workshops for the community, teaching financial literacy to people with disabilities and their families. The bank even commissioned Emma to design a mural for their lobby, a vibrant painting of a sun rising over a field of wildflowers, symbolizing new beginnings. Emma was thrilled by the opportunity. She spent hours working on the mural, pouring her heart into every brushstroke. When it was finally unveiled, the entire town gathered to see it. The sight of her artwork, displayed so prominently in a place that had once been a source of pain, filled Emma with a pride she could hardly put into words. The mural quickly became a symbol of the bank's transformation. Customers who had once viewed the bank as just another cold, impersonal institution now saw it as a place of warmth and inclusion. It wasn't just the physical changes that made a difference, it was the people. Janet, Linda, and the rest of the staff began treating every customer with the same kindness and respect that Keanu had modeled on that fateful day. The change wasn't immediate, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was noticed. Keanu, who had stayed in Willow Creek longer than planned, often visited the bank to check on Emma and see how the changes were progressing. On one of these visits, he found Emma sitting in the lobby, sketching in her notebook. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Hi, Keanu," she said. "What brings you here today?" He smiled back, pulling up a chair beside her. "Just wanted to see how my favorite artist is doing. That mural is incredible, by the way. You should be proud." Emma blushed, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her notebook. "Thank you. It feels good to know people like it." "They don't just like it," Keanu said. "It's inspiring them. You're inspiring them." Emma tilted her head, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Do you really think people can change? Like, really change?" Keanu nodded without hesitation. "I do. But it takes effort. It takes people like you, Emma, people who show the world what kindness and courage look like." Emma smiled at his words, her confidence growing with each passing day. She had started to believe in herself in a way she never had before, and it showed in everything she did. She began to take on more art projects, partnering with local businesses to create murals and designs that celebrated diversity and inclusion. Her cards, once a small side project, became a town favorite, with people clamoring to buy them for every occasion. Meanwhile, the story of the bank's transformation began to gain attention beyond Willow Creek. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting the changes the bank had made and Emma's role in inspiring them. Social media buzzed with posts about the mural, Keanu's intervention, and the power of kindness. The hashtag kindness starts here began trending, and donations poured in for disability advocacy groups across the country. One day, Emma received a letter from a young girl in another state. The girl, who also had Down syndrome, wrote about how Emma's story had given her the courage to speak up at her school when she was being bullied. The letter brought tears to Emma's eyes, and she realized that her impact was bigger than she had ever imagined. As the weeks turned into months, Willow Creek became a beacon of hope. A small town that had shown the world what was possible when people chose kindness over judgment, action over apathy. The bank became a model for other businesses, with leaders from across the region visiting to learn from its transformation. For Emma, life had changed in ways she could never have anticipated. She was no longer just the woman who sold cards at the weekend market. She was an artist, an advocate, and a voice for change. And through it all, she remained humble, her heart full of gratitude for the people who had believed in her. Keanu's time in Willow Creek eventually came to an end, but his bond with Emma remained unshakable. On his last day in town, they sat together on a park bench, watching the sunset over the rolling hills. "You've done something amazing here, Emma," Keanu said. "And it's only the beginning." Emma looked at him, her eyes shining with determination. "I want to keep making a difference," she said. "Not just here, but everywhere." Keanu smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I have no doubt you will." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma felt a sense of peace she had never known. She wasn't just a woman with Down syndrome. She was someone who mattered, someone who could make a difference. And for the first time, she truly believed it. A lasting legacy. Months passed, but the impact of Emma's story and the community day in Willow Creek didn't fade. Instead, it grew, rippling outward like a stone dropped into still water. The mural in the bank's lobby became more than just a decoration, it became a symbol of hope and change. People traveled from neighboring towns to see it, take pictures, and learn about the story behind it. What had started as a small-town event was now inspiring change on a much larger scale. Emma found herself at the center of this growing movement. Invitations poured in from schools, businesses, and organizations asking her to share her story. At first, she was hesitant. The memory of her initial fear before the community day lingered in her mind, but then she thought of Keanu's words, "You're stronger than you think." Those words had carried her through before, and she decided they could carry her again. Her first speaking engagement outside of Willow Creek was at a high school in a nearby city. Standing in front of a room full of teenagers was intimidating, but Emma reminded herself why she was there. She told her story simply, speaking from the heart about her experiences, her love of art, and the importance of kindness. By the time she finished, the entire room was on its feet, clapping and cheering for her. Students lined up to thank her personally, some sharing their own struggles and how her words had given them hope. That night, Emma sat in her small living room, surrounded by sketches and letters of thanks from the students. She realized that her voice, which she had once thought didn't matter, was making a difference. People were listening. They were learning. And they were changing. Keanu kept in touch with Emma, even as his schedule took him to far-off places. He called regularly to check in, offering encouragement and advice as she navigated her new role as an advocate. On one of their calls, Keanu said something that stuck with her: "Change doesn't happen all at once. It's built one moment, one story, one act of kindness at a time. You're building something extraordinary, Emma." Inspired by his words, Emma began thinking about how she could turn her personal story into something bigger. She wanted to create a space where people with disabilities could thrive, a place where their talents, voices, and dreams were celebrated. With the help of her newfound connections, she started planning what would eventually become the Emma Clark Foundation for Kindness and Inclusion. The foundation's mission was simple: to promote kindness, inclusivity, and creativity. It offered workshops in art, financial literacy, and public speaking for people with disabilities. It also provided resources for businesses and schools to implement inclusivity programs. The foundation's motto, inspired by Keanu's words, was, "Kindness builds change." When the foundation launched, Emma held a small ceremony in Willow Creek to celebrate. The town square was filled with people who had come to support her, from old friends to new admirers. The mayor gave a speech praising her efforts, and Mr. Harris presented a donation from the bank to help fund the foundation's programs. Even Janet, the teller who had once humiliated Emma, stood proudly in the crowd, now one of the bank's most vocal advocates for inclusion. As Emma stepped up to the microphone to thank everyone, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Just a few months ago, she had been the quiet woman standing in line at the bank, clutching her savings book and feeling invisible. Now, she stood before a crowd, not just as Emma but as a leader, an artist, and a voice for change. "This foundation isn't just about me," Emma said, her voice steady and strong. "It's about all of us. It's about what we can do when we choose kindness over judgment, understanding over fear. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change someone's life. I know, because it changed mine." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Emma looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a profound sense of purpose. She knew that the work she was doing was bigger than herself, and it filled her with a quiet, unwavering determination to keep going. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting media attention and support from across the country. Donations poured in, allowing Emma to expand its reach. She hired a small team of passionate individuals who shared her vision, including people with disabilities who had never been given opportunities to lead before. Together, they created a network of programs that touched lives in ways Emma had never imagined. One of the foundation's most successful initiatives was a traveling art exhibit called Expressions of Kindness, featuring artwork created by people with disabilities from all over the country. The exhibit included Emma's own paintings, including the original sketch of the mural she had created for the bank. Each piece told a story, and visitors left the exhibit moved by the beauty and resilience on display. As Emma's work grew, so did her confidence. She traveled to conferences, met with lawmakers to advocate for disability rights, and even gave a speech at the United Nations on the importance of inclusion. She never forgot where she came from or the people who had supported her along the way, especially Keanu. On a quiet autumn evening, Emma received a call from Keanu, who was filming in Europe. "I saw the news," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You're doing incredible things, Emma." Emma smiled, holding the phone close to her ear. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You did the hard part," Keanu replied. "You chose to step up, to keep going even when it was hard. That's all you." Emma looked out her window at the setting sun, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. She thought about how far she had come and how much farther she wanted to go. "Thank you, Keanu," she said. "For everything." "No," Keanu said softly. "Thank you. For reminding me, and the world, what kindness can do." As the call ended, Emma sat in silence for a moment, the warmth of his words lingering in her heart. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the people who had helped her along the way, and the lives she had touched. It was a legacy she hadn't planned for, but one she embraced with all her heart. Emma knew there was still so much work to be done, but she wasn't afraid. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her place in the world. And with every mural she painted, every speech she gave, and every person she inspired, she knew she was building something extraordinary, something that would last far beyond her lifetime. The legacy of kindness she had started in Willow Creek was no longer just a ripple. It was a wave, spreading out into the world, carrying with it the simple but powerful truth that kindness could change everything. And it all began with one moment, one voice, and one act of courage.